It is a horrible idea that there is somebody who owns us, who makes us, who supervises us, waking and sleeping, who knows our thoughts, who can convict us of thought crime, thought crime, just for what we think.
As soon as you realize that there is no way that a God can exist who is supposedly perfectly just, who will only judge you on the basis of whether or not you believe, if that were the approach God were taking, then the fact that God has not provided adequate evidence to actually rationally and justifiably believe this thing is on God.
Hello YouTube, this is the Asian Theist here, and I've decided to take a break from the usual response videos in order to cover an important and possibly underappreciated subject. It's no secret that atheists and other critics of Christianity have a habit of painting a negative picture of God when we tell them that Jesus/God is the only way to salvation. While many atheists would simply be content with rejecting God and his supposed attributes, there are also those who would go the extra mile and say that they would only follow God if they agreed with his commands, assuming he existed.
So I don't think it's...
Wait. Sorry. So you're saying if God existed and you disagreed with his commands, you wouldn't...
Yeah, of course.
You would go your own way?
Of course.
Okay. God gives you the free will to do that. But is that a rational position?
I think so.
Or that no amount of evidence would convince them that God exists at all.
What would persuade you?
Well, I'm starting to think nothing would, which in a way goes against the grain, because I've always paid lip service to the view that a scientist should change his mind when evidence is forthcoming. The trouble is I can't think what that evidence would look like.
Regardless of your stance, let's suppose, as a thought experiment, that God did exist, and that he has all the attributes that Christians typically give him, as in he is just, omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent, etc. Would following this God be an obligation? The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle seems to think so. Although Aristotle was never aware of Jesus' existence, he has written a part about humanity's obligation to divine beings in his work, Politics. As atheists like to paint themselves as the champions of reason, I figured that reading the following parts of his work seemed appropriate. Aristotle writes in Book 3, Chapter 13 of Politics, "If, however, there be some one person, or more than one, although not enough to make up the full complement of a state, whose virtue is so preeminent that the virtues or the political capacity of all the rest admit of no comparison with his or theirs, he or they can no longer be regarded as part of a state, for justice will not be done to the superior, if he is reckoned only as the equal of those who are so far inferior to him in virtue and in political capacity. Such an one may truly be deemed a god among men. Hence we see that legislation is necessarily concerned only with those who are equal in birth and in capacity, and that for men of preeminent virtue there is no law. They are themselves a law. Mankind will not say that such an one is to be expelled and exiled. On the other hand, he ought not to be a subject. That would be as if mankind should claim to rule over Zeus, dividing his offices among them. The only alternative is that all should joyfully obey such a ruler according to what seems to be the order of nature, and that men like him should be kings in their state for life." He expands on this point further in Book 3, Chapter 17. "But when a whole family or some individual happens to be so preeminent in virtue as to surpass all others, then it is just that they should be the royal family and supreme over all, or that this one citizen should be king of the whole nation. For as I said before, to give them authority is not only agreeable to that ground of right, which the founders of all states, whether aristocratical or oligarchical, or again democratical, are accustomed to put forward, for these all recognize the claim of excellence, although not the same excellence. but in accordance with the principle already laid down. For surely it would not be right to kill or ostracize or exile such a person, or require that he should take his turn in being governed. The whole is naturally superior to the part, and he who has this preeminence is in the relation of a whole to a part. But if so, the only alternative, did you catch that? The only alternative is that he should have the supreme power and that mankind should obey him, not in turn, but always. So from what I gather, if there is a God who is just, omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent, and so on, or as Aristotle says, preeminent in virtue, then humanity as a whole is subject to his authority, irrespective of the apparent evidence of his existence and or the acceptance of such. In other words, the mere fact of his existence is what binds us to him. I didn't write this, the Bible didn't write this. Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophical and scientific minds in history, wrote this. Now, before you atheists start commenting about the disproportionate nature of being tortured for all eternity for thought crime, or how God didn't give people enough information before sending them to hell, keep in mind that I don't buy the literal fire view and that I view hell on its own as mere separation from God. Someone like Stephen Hawking, for instance, is likely not sharing bunks with Adolf Hitler. As for the argument of people not being given enough proof of God before being sent to hell, I would respond by saying that if God was truly omniscient and just, he definitely would have considered every scenario. This view is arguably supported by John chapter 9, verse 41. Jesus said, If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. If you want a more thorough dissection on my current interpretations of hell, links are in the description. That's about it. Be sure to like, comment respectfully, and subscribe if you want to help the channel grow, and tap the bell icon to be notified immediately when the next video is up. In the meantime, this is the Asian Theist, signing off.